Hello, and welcome to our newest edition of National Gypsum's AIA-approved webinar series, High Performance Gypsum for Today's Buildings. My name is Thad Goodman, and I will be co-presenting today with Alan Zedick. We are part of a construction design manager team whose responsibility is to help you choose the best products for your projects and also be a training resource for your firm. Our goal today and every day with all of our webinars is to build knowledge together. Before we jump in, just a couple quick housekeeping items. We have a pretty great turnout today for this webinar, so all attendees are in listen-only mode. Feel free to use the Q&A to submit any questions you might have during the course of this session. Several of my counterparts will be monitoring questions as they come in. If we run out of time, all the questions that we didn't get answered will be sent with a follow-up communication that will include your local construction design manager's contact info. So we'll get you covered one way or the other. AIA credits will be submitted on your behalf if you included your AIA number at registration. Now, if you are calling in by phone, we don't know who you are. So please add your full name, your email address, AIA number, and it probably wouldn't hurt just to put your phone number in there to make sure we can link everybody together. AIA credits are only earned today during the live session. If you're listening to this at a later date from our website where we'll post it, no credit will be offered. Reach out to your construction design manager for an in-house lunch and learn if you want some for your firm. Certificates of participation for everybody who attends will be sent to all attendees with their email addresses or the information you provide in the Q&A. We will follow up today's presentation with an email that will include links to all this stuff and some resources that Alan and I will talk about today. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right in. As we said, this is an AIA presentation. We went through the logistics for that. Interestingly enough, this one has recently been redesigned, and it also now provides GBCI credit. The number is here. Obviously, we'll provide a link to this presentation, so you'll have it there if you don't have time to copy this down. Everyone must self-report credit to GBCI. We don't have a mechanism to be able to do that. So if you want those types of credits, we'll give you the information. You've had the presentation. You can go from there. We do copyright these presentations, but we'll be happy to provide a PDF, and there will be a link on the website. Course description. Roughly 40 years ago, a gypsum product that could endure extreme weather, resist fire, and mold was introduced to the marketplace. This course will explore the differences between the paper-faced and fiberglass products that are out there and talk about solutions, where you can use them, how you can get sustainability credit for them as well. Some of the learning objectives: we'll examine the ASTM standards for installing these products and where they will go on the job. We'll talk about the different properties that will help you achieve the fire ratings and all the different situations where you might want to use them. We'll identify the importance of specifying products for dimensional stability, giving you resilient wall designs. We'll talk about the difference in durability of fiberglass faced as opposed to regular paper-faced gypsum board. And we'll talk a little bit about LEED and how you can meet your sustainability goals with these products. So we'll start with gypsum panel basics, go through the high performance characteristics, and then we'll talk about where they would be used on your project. And then we'll talk a little bit about some LEED contributions and kind of wrap up with some marketing stuff that we have. So we need to start out with what are the two basic types of gypsum as we talk about natural gypsum and sustainable gypsum. Natural gypsum is a rock formed at the bottom of shallow basins of oceans over millennia. If you think about gypsum deposits, they're found all over the world. If you think about the United States as a natural ocean-covered body that we once were, there's a natural basin of gypsum that runs from down in Texas diagonally through the Northeast up into Nova Scotia. So that's where the largest quantities of gypsum deposits are in the United States. For those of you involved in sustainability, if you've asked for recycled gypsum over the course of the last 15 or 20 years, this is how you got to that product. This is byproduct gypsum. It's a man-made gypsum product that's a result of scrubbing high sulfur coal power plants. So the sulfur oxide is running up through the stacks as that high sulfur coal is hit. We shoot a calcium sulfate spray over it. It gets weighted down. Those emissions don't go into the atmosphere, which is fantastic. They get captured at the bottom of the basin. If you can see it in the lower right-hand corner here, what falls down there is actually natural gypsum, only now it's a chemical reaction to something that we've done from a man-made pot. It's a higher purity often than what we find when we dig it out of the ground.
The rock is then ground into smaller pieces and heated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, where a chemical reaction called calcination takes place. Gypsum is composed of molecules of calcium sulfate and water locked into a rigid crystalline structure. When the gypsum is heated, about 75% of the water is driven off as steam. The resulting white powder is commonly called stucco. When water is added to the stucco, the crystals reform and the gypsum returns to its original hardness.
So as these gypsum crystals are reforming from that rehydration process we just saw in that bucket, in traditional drywall world, we want those products to adhere to the paper that we wrap around the drywall. So this is a picture of a paper-faced drywall product. This is a product that's been around since 1915, been here for over a decade now. Comes traditionally in 3 different sizes: 1/2 inch, 5/8, and then we have 1/2 inch and 5/8 with what we call a type C product. So these gypsum crystals rehydrate. We want them to attract to the paper. We use starches and sugars to do that. They're called attractants, and we make this product. We can squeeze it through like a thick milkshake. We can squeeze it through an extruder, and we make it 1/2 inch or 5/8, 1 inch, whatever size we want. So knowing that, you understand that all gypsum board has a natural degree of fire protection. At the top here, you'll see these 3 pictures here, these 3 products here. That's a 1/2 inch product at the top. When we want to make a product more fireproof, we do a couple things to it. The first thing we do is we make it thicker. If we want it to last an hour in a fire-rated system, we need to have some more of that life-saving water to help ward off the fire from one side of the assembly to the other. So the first thing we do is we make it 5/8 thick. But that alone isn't enough to make it happen. As it starts to lose its steam off and be chemically destroyed again in a fire, it wants to start to fall apart. And so one of the ways we hold it together is we put some fiberglass fibers intertwined into the core. And on the right-hand picture, you can see the little fibers that are sticking up there because we cut a piece of it in half. This acts like rebar in concrete, and it actually helps hold it together longer as it's chemically being destroyed, so we can get the 1, 2, 3 hour the protection that we need. Occasionally, you'll think about a Type C product in some of your designs. You'll see that we as gypsum manufacturers have tested a Type C product. What's happened here is if you think about a panel of gypsum, there's 4x8, 4x10, 4x12 areas in a high moisture or in a high fire area, like a ceiling where the heat rises. Fire wants to start to pull things apart because that product is drying out, so it wants to shrink. That's one of the reasons we fire tape all of our tests, so we hold things together longer. Oftentimes, that's not quite enough. To be able to pass the rating in those high sensitive heat areas, we need to do something else. So we'll add an additional additive, an unexpanded vermiculite that you see here in this little pile. And what happens is they act like popcorn in a fire. And so as the fire starts to want to shrink the water, the vermiculite starts to expand and it holds things together long enough that we can pass the fire test. As we said earlier, all gypsum has natural chemical water in it. Look at the middle line here. 5/8 Type X 4x12 gypsum board has 22 pounds of chemical water sitting there like a silent sentry waiting to be enacted in a fire. So that's the thing that helps us when we have a fire. When we say that gypsum is a fire resistant barrier, it's gassing off those items, and it's because the paper gets burned off pretty quick on one side of that. And so we're gassing those off to be able to control the fire, the spread of the fire from one side of the assembly to the other. That's traditional drywall. Alan's going to take you through some of the high performance characteristics of what a fiberglass mat panel does.
All right, thanks, Thad. So switching gears in the high performance characteristics, the fiberglass, one of the great things is inherently mold resistant, more dimensionally stable under temperature and humidity than paper faced, superior strength, fire resistance, and one of the most important things that the fiberglass will give you a 12-month exposure warranty, which in some parts of the country can be very beneficial. So when you look at testing, how do they test for mold resistance? So ASTM D3273 is the test that's done where resistance to growth of mold on the surface of interior coatings in an environmental chamber. So you take this chamber, you set the relative humidity range between 95 and 98%. You put mold spores injected in the soil, and the panels are scored after 28 days. So 0 to 10, 10 means no mold growth. Normal paper will be a 0 to 3 on normal paper. Treated paper will also reach a 10. So that's the important thing, reaching that 10. And some parts of the country, like Florida, we're in our own humidity chamber down here because most of the year you've got that high humidity level, and we're the perfect testing ground for many years of fiberglass technology down here in the South. So when it comes, very importantly, to fire, which Thad just spoke about, the fire resistant characteristics of gypsum, you're going to see the high performance gypsum products will be used in a wide range of UL rated assemblies. You can reference those in the Gypsum Association GA600 and also the UL.com, the UL Product IQ, which is a place to look up all the assemblies that you might be looking at. And once again, Type X products may be used in generic fire rated assemblies out there. So that GA600 just came out here a few months ago with its latest edition. Every 3 years they update that. So it is updated here just this year if you don't have the current manual on that. So another important thing, especially you get into healthcare and some other areas, but your Green Guard Gold, many of the products might be Green Guard Gold certified for indoor air quality. Mold resistant gypsum panels and interior finishing products contribute once again to a higher quality construction and indoor air quality. May be available with high recycled content and contribute to a LEED credit, available on a regional basis. HBDs may also be available from manufacturers. You can also see an EPD copy up there on the right. So it's important. You're seeing more and more of that done out there, but a lot of that we have available on our website for that information. So how the products kind of evolve, we'll go through a timeline here, but the sheathing was the first to come out back in the 80s, but then we're going to go through all these products. Roof cover board, which is very important, which Thad's going to do a section on that and how much the cover board can help save in that roof design. Your shaft liner assemblies, and then looking at interior, we've got interior extended exposure panels, abuse and impact, and then the tile backer for your wet areas when you're looking in design construction. So looking at extended exposure, starting out with the sheathing, here is a good example. The building thermal envelope is defined as what separates the building from unconditioned space. So these elements include the roof ceiling assembly, your exterior walls, now defined as any wall that surrounds interior space, mass walls, below grade walls, your fenestration, the floor assembly where the floor is over unconditioned space, and the slab edge. And then, like here in Florida, where I live, you look at vapor drive most of the year, right? It's hitting that outside stuck or whatever it has, and it's trying to warm the cold, working its way into that air conditioned inside wall that's there. And then you get up north, up in Minnesota or some of those areas. Well, in the winter, you're heating that inside. That vapor drive is trying to go to the outside to meet that cold on the exterior where it's 10 below zero. So it's very important on how that building envelope is designed in different parts of the country. So here's kind of a little history of exterior sheathing. So you see here paper-based 1800s, plywood 1940s, paper gypsum 1960s, and then we don't have it on here, 1963 it was called wafer board, but OSB was first invented by a gentleman out in California, and they really didn't start putting it in the market until the 70s in the US. And you see rigid foam also in the 1970s. And then early 80s, fiberglass matte gypsum was first invented out there, which we'll go through, but it's had a series of enhancements since that time when it first came out there, and billions of feet, right, since 1983. And actually, the first job was in 1983 in Old Orchard, Maine, which still stands up there today. So in the 80s, basically, how did they come up with this? Well, the fiberglass gyp sheathing, which involved taking fiberglass mat, if you've ever seen fiberglass shingles, and used in the asphalt business to make a gypsum panel. So they took that fiberglass mat and used that for the coatings to surround that gypsum core. So the mat technology, which we have mentioned, has undergone many improvements. You'd walk out in the job back in the early 80s, a lot of those guys weren't real happy to see you, especially in the hot South, because there was a lot of fiberglass disengagement. And those guys were, if you ever handled fiberglass insulation in walls, it could be very itchy and annoying. So that mat has changed considerably through the years. We have coated mats now, so you don't have that fiberglass and disengagement. So you'll see the alkali, UV, and moisture resistant coatings, and you'll see, right, you've got the rainbow of colors. You've got yellow, you've got purple, you've got green, you've got blue, you've got white. So a number of the patented colors are used out there in these exterior sheathings. And basically, like I mentioned, billions of feet have been produced. So it's one of the preferred sheathings for commercial construction with a great, fantastic track record. So ASTM-C 1177 was created basically when the exterior sheathing came out. And some of the other attributes is your ASTM E84 for Class A material, ASTM-C 473, which the fiberglass and the core greatly help with low surface water absorption, moisture-resistant core, low humidified deflection, excellent substrate for primers, adhesives and membranes, from your peel and sticks to your adhered membranes, great compressive strength, flexural, dimensional stability, and also non-combustible. So you've got a treated core. The gypsum fiberglass actually bonds really great. It's very, I guess, easier to run than paper a lot of times for some plants. So it's a great product for the manufacturers to run. The fiberglass mat is treated with acrylic coating, which helps with the moisture resistance, which then fills voids and openings in the mat and helps further protect the core and mat from the elements. And then also potential moisture intrusion due to wicking or capillary action is eliminated. So you can see here you've got the gypsum core, and that fiberglass is wrapped all the way around that panel. The edges, front and back, is all fiberglass. So here's a number of areas where it's been used out there. You see behind brick, cement board stucco systems, your EIFs, were some of the first to really utilize that, because years ago they would have the paper face chip sheathing, which if you had enough rain, there wasn't really much or any warranty with that stuff, and a lot of problems. So exterior soffits is another area you get, especially down in Florida. You go into these big hotel entrances where you can pull all your cars. A lot of those soffits have been done with the fiberglass mat gypsum. You can fiber cement siding over it, metal cladding, stucco, just a number of surfaces that have been used for many, many years over the products. So brick, there's a picture you can see. It's been insulated. One good thing on the cement board stucco systems, you look at a normal stucco system, right, that can go over that, where you use your paperback lath and you don't really get much of a warranty, where a number of these systems with the cement board have actually warranted through your EIFS manufacturer. So you can get maybe a 10-year warranty, where on normal stucco, what do you have out there? I'm sure all aware there's not a whole lot that covers that. So something to consider and different methods of going over. There's also insulated panels now connected to the cement board. And then you can see the application here with thin brick or cultured stone, a great bond with the modified thin sets that apply to this too, versus going over a stucco type finish when you're looking at thin brick and cultured stones and that type scenario. And then of course the EIFS, those guys have been out there, for many, many years with their warranted systems. And I guess one of the important things, we'll sometimes get guys calling us, well, yeah, what's the screw spacing on your sheathing? Well, a lot of areas it's just 8 inches on center. But the important thing is, well, what system are you using? Because some of the EIFS guys, well, it's actually 6 inches on center. So they've asked that question not to pay attention to the system going over that. So they're going to have to come back and do screws. So it's important that they understand the whole system, especially when you get in the coastal areas, right? A lot of times you're going to require more screws because you have more wind loads to deal with. So just some things to consider sometimes when they don't think of the whole system and just putting the board up. So another great area is extended exposure gyp sheathing. So one of the great things with the fiberglass is on 5/8 fiberglass panels, you've got less than 1/8 of an inch, 5 times better than normal paper face. So you can finish the joints in skim coat with the setting compound, which you can do that in the paper or the fiberglass, or there's numerous EIFS systems. Now, the thing to remember is a lot of the EIFS manufacturers, if you look at their submittals, they're going to require meeting C1177, right? And we know what that is. That's your exterior sheathing glass mat. So it's important, if you're using, once again, a system that, okay, you just can't put this over paper or something like that. It's got to be over C1177. So just things to consider when you get into those different soffit applications. So some of the advantages, which kind of all of the fiberglass falls in this, but superior dimensional stability to resist warping, buckling, and sagging, resistant to delamination caused by weather exposure, provides a superior bonding surface for weather-resistant barriers, non-combustible, zero flame spread, and zero smoke development. You can see there those pictures. There was a job, probably been 15, 16 years ago, somewhere around 2008. But if anyone has ever been up to Jacksonville near the Jaguar Stadium, there was a probably 10, 12-story building, and they had the parking garage had collapsed while they were pouring the concrete and had some fatalities. So that job ended up standing uncoated with nothing on it, just the board applied to the building for 10, 12 years. Now, the sun UV rays are pretty harsh. It faded that. But 2 or 3 hurricanes had gone through Jacksonville after that 2007, 2008 period, through those 10, 12 years. And, once again, it was pretty faded, but the board, you think of this wood down here, or OSB, imagine in Florida with the summer daily rains that you get, what that would have looked like. Now, we're not saying you can go 12 years exposed. It's a 12-month exposure warranty, but it shows you the resilience of just how well, and for many, many years, the billions of feet, this product, how well it performs. So limitations, not to be used as a finished surface. You're just not going to go out and paint it. It's got to have some system going over it. Not to be used as nailing base, which you're not going to see many gypsum products that can be a nailing base. You're going to have to back block that or something, just like hanging pictures of interior walls and things like that. You're going to have to back block it. While designs for weather exposure is not intended for submersion in water, so you're not going to make a swimming pool out of it. Not to be used below grade, and not to be used as a tile substrate. What happens, you think of in Florida when it's 95 degrees, you have a dark brown or black tile. That tile's attached to that heats up probably 200 degrees. Who knows what? Very warm. So gypsum calcines at 125. So just not a good thing there. You want to use cement board on the exterior if you're using some type of tile or that type of application. And switching back to Mr. Thad.
Thank you, Alan. Another glass mat panel product that's done a fantastic job in the industry to basically revitalize how buildings are built. Alan talked about the building envelope and how important the sheathing is with that 12-month exposure warranty and the ability to shed water and keep water where it belongs. Same has happened when we think about the single ply membrane market and how much the roofing industry has changed with that. Using a glass mat roof product has been just a real game changer. It's again an ASTM C1177 product. It's mold and mildew and water resistant with the treated core. It gives an opportunity when we use a cover board, which we recommend throughout, and many people do. We'll talk about that. It's a nice, smooth, flat membrane for these single ply systems. It provides additional adhesion characteristics. It gives you good fire ratings when we need a P rating, perhaps. And one of the comments that we're going to see, we'll look in the next slide. There's a lot of things that happen on a roof now that didn't used to. There was a time where you put your roof up there, and then nobody really, unless you had some sort of maintenance issue, had to fix a leak or something, you never went up there. With the space that happens, especially in the more condensed areas, there's more and more things on commercial roofs every day. Look at this top right-hand picture, all these different air handling units. Just imagine somebody going up to do maintenance on these on a regular basis. Yes, we put pavers. The architect, you as an architect, will place pavers where you think they make sense. A lot of times the maintenance people get up there, the facility maintenance people, they take the shortest path between 2 points, maybe drop a wrench or something like that. So you need something that's a good solid substrate to help keep your factory mutual approvals and meet your fire ratings with ASTM and UL. We do our best to think about how we're going to work on a project, even during construction. If you look at the lower picture, that's Ford Field. They're actually working on the area up above that, the domed part of that particular roof, and this was a finished roof they're working on down there. So it was actually being used at a construction site. Now they put some tarps over it, but again, you've got people walking on that on a regular basis as a finished roof. It didn't take very long, once this product was introduced in the late 90s, for the contractors associations to start to come out and say, okay, we're starting to see the fact that cover boards make a lot of sense. For years, there had been using like regular gypsum as a 15-minute thermal barrier, and if it got wet, it was basically flute filler. In this particular case, they say, okay, there's a variety of things that we can use. Makes a lot of sense to put something up there. All of a sudden, next thing we saw was a recommendation from them, those folks that said examples of a non-combustible cover board include glass mat face gypsum boards. We call them panels today, but gypsum boards. Cover board is an industry term. And so here's the contractors themselves saying we need to have the best product to protect our system for the life of the building. An additional area where we started to see some advantages immediately to that additional adhesion is when you started looking at wind speed maps. Here's one, from 2005. Traditionally, you start to think about what happens on the coast where water comes in from the ocean. That's where we see the most vulnerabilities, down there where Alan's at in Florida, 100, 150 miles an hour. It's not uncommon if you look at what just happened with Helene and some of the stuff that we saw down there recently. In the middle of the country, where I live, flyover country, it's often referred to, pretty much not paid attention to for many, many years. As we move forward, now here's a Category 2 wind speed map, but here we are in 2016. All of a sudden, with the climate changes and the different ways that the patterns have been going on for the climates and the winds, we start to see requirements made for the construction industry that are much more stringent, identified by county in these areas. And now, as you can see, we're at 180 degrees down on the coast, so we are seeing more violent, more regular speed, higher speeds down below, but we're starting to identify things that are happening in the middle of the country as well. And of course, if we think about the Category 3 and 4, those areas of refuge, those high schools, those hospitals, those areas of shelter, when people have some sort of a problem where they would go to, those requirements have become much, much more stringent. If you think about 120 in the middle of the country, that was unheard of 20 years ago. So wind speed has become a very, very real topic. And here's examples of some of the things that can happen when your roof isn't edged well. There's maybe a split in the seam. There's a problem somewhere. We start to see the different types of topography that are out there and how wind can do a terrible thing to a roof. There's some nice testing that's being done on a regular basis. Here's an example of a wind uplift testing chamber. And if you've never seen one, I would encourage you to go watch it. Take a snack because it's extremely boring for the first half hour of the test. And then there's this really exciting part for about 3 seconds, and then it gets really boring again. But the whole thought process here is they build a test model. They start to inject air in it, 10 or 15 pounds at a time. And what they see is, you see this bubble here, something's happened there. There's been a seam that's started to pull loose. There's been a fastener that let loose, and then things start to, the pressure on that starts to go. And so one of the ways that they control this is they're starting to adjust the roof membrane fastener patterns. There was a time where it was always only anything that was done was there on the right-hand side, where they just have something in the center to kind of keep things in place, and then they have the perimeter. And we're starting to get more and more and more stringent as we get these higher and higher wind loads. Another area that has problems for a roof, especially a single membrane roof, is hail. There was a time where hail was pretty much limited to the middle of the country, Kansas, Oklahoma, northern Texas. Those areas, as wind patterns have changed, as weather patterns have changed, have expanded to the point where we're touching the edge of Ohio, where I live, which is almost unheard of. If you look in the bottom right-hand picture, what you see there is a single membrane roof that's basically been torn up by hail. And when you go out after a storm and all these little round tiny balls are there, you think about, okay, how could that happen? But if you look at the top picture, you'll see a place where there's been a hailstorm. Somebody got to it before it all started to melt off. And you can see that as this ice forms on the way down, it's ragged on the edges. And so when it hits, it rolls and it causes all kinds of problems. Here's a little video that they did. One of the fellows that we had that was there, he actually put his cell phone in that chamber, which was pretty brave because this is a pretty robust test. We'll take a look at it. So that's just an example of some of the things, some of the testing that's done out there to try to keep our buildings protected as products move forward. Another area where there's some support for glass mat gypsum products, panels, is shaft liner. Alan?
Thanks, Dad. So now going into another area where the fiberglass has really been beneficial in some of these projects. This, you're going to see 2-foot width, because a 4-foot width piece that's 1 inch thick, you could build some muscle in a hurry, having to tote those around all day. So you're going to see this only 2-foot width. Standard lengths 8, 10, or 12. So that's important to remember too. We'll get into some area separation wall pictures here, but when you're doing an area separation wall system, your metal 8 studs that'll go between is either 8, 10, or 12-foot lengths. So we've had calls, well, I've got 12-foot board and only 10-foot 8 studs. Well, the 8 studs are the same length. So either you have to cut the board down to 10 feet or get 12-foot 8 studs. Whereas in shaft liner, you can stack the panels, but in the area separation walls, which you'll see pictures of, those panels have to run from your C-track to C-track vertically. So the edges are beveled, which you can see here, which makes it easy, especially for when you're doing the 2 back-to-back in the H channel. It makes it easier sliding in that 2-inch wide piece of H track. And then this is going to be ASTM-C 1658 for this product. And this also, like all the fiberglass, scores a 10 on that ASTM D3273. So fire resistant Type X core with many different assemblies out there. So here's a good picture of your shaft where you're able to build that from one side. Lightweight versus going up masonry up 40, 50 stories, allows for extended exposure during the elements during construction. You can go from a 1 to 4 hour firewall in those systems. And the bottom picture there, separation wall, is 2 to 3 hours. And you can see that bottom pictures are building those, especially in Florida. You get out west in the desert, not as bad maybe, but the summer here, you set your watch up 3 o'clock, you're going to get downpours. So as you're building this thing up, used to be when you only had the paper faced material, they'd try and pull visqueen over that, and to protect it, it was a huge lifesaver for multifamily area separation walls. And then, there was once a project in South Florida where they had, before they had fiberglass, they had poured shafts out of it twice before they decided to switch to fiberglass, which they had tried to keep it before it got topped out. But they had what happens usually when they test the plumbing lines? Well, they had tested the plumbing, and that water all ran down the shaft, so it gave them problems again. If you ever looked at the bottom of shaft liner, elevator shaft pit, it's usually several feet of water in there. So that tells you a lot of how much moisture can go down these shafts sometimes. So it's just in these two areas, it's been a huge asset out there for many projects. So here's a good example of your H stud. Once again, the height of that has to run the same as the panel. So you'll see your 2 flanking walls and that little white gap there in that center picture. That's minimum 3/4 inch gap, which, by the way, we do have a course just on multifamily air separation walls that we offer, as there's a lot of issues with it getting misinstalled a lot of times out there. But you can see on that bottom right pictures, they're being built. There's nothing to protect that. So daily rains, it can be, can get pretty wicked if they're trying to use something that's not resistant to rain in those type conditions. So here's a good example of just how well the area separation walls work. So you can see on the left in the center of that burned out section there, that's the area shaft liner. And they're designed to be a standalone wall, non-load bearing. Both these shaft systems are non-load bearing. But what is attached is a little L-shaped aluminum burn clip. And that is, when that reaches a certain temperature, you can see all that framing burns and falls and retains itself inside those area separation wall firewalls. So on the other side of that wall, you've got your other flanking wall. That's where the clips are holding that in place, as the other side fire had burned and it dropped off. But it just shows you, for more than 40, 45 years, the area separation wall systems have been in use. So a fantastic track record on these products for fire safety. And looking at some cases in a shaft. So here is a 4-hour non-bearing, once again, shaft wall system. And here you can see all the components. You have your J-track to cap it and start it on the bottom. And then you can either use a CT, CH, or I stud 4-inch. And then you can see where you pull the little fingers out and the shaft liner goes in that section. Then you go over this to get your 4-hour. You've got the layers of 5/8 type C. And then the outside, you can see the 2 layers are over a 7/8 inch furring channel. But on that particular system there, that gets you a 4-hour shaft wall component system. And then since 9/11, the City of New York amended Building Code Section 1, which impact resistant stair and elevator enclosures. So the IBC Section 403 2.3, structural integrity of exit enclosures and elevator hoistway enclosures. And then you look at your code requirement pertaining to, you saw the ad showing the wind loads on the category 3 and 4, but certain building heights and minimum design criteria for shaft wall impact resistance. So in that's an area, another area we have a course just on abuse and impact, because a lot of times it's not specified correctly. And the important thing is you see that 5/8 type X impact resistant is on the back side, you have a fiberglass scrim in there where the abuse, once again, the cores are both dense, but that scrim is what keeps you from kicking through that wall without breaking your toe. So that scrim, it's important that it meets a hard body level 3 test when that's specified, but that's something we can help if you're ever looking at that, because a lot of times they lump those together and the contractors are always going to go with the abuse, which is cheaper. So advantages, once again, all the shaft liner and all the fiberglass, superior water, benchional stability, resist warping, rippling, specially coated front, back, and edges, easily scored and snapped to exact size without sawing. So all the fiberglass kind of fall into that advantage, plus your 12-month exposure warranty. And limitations, cavity shaft walls are an area separate a non-load bearing, which we mentioned. Temperature, which we mentioned earlier on the exterior, but should not exceed over 125 degrees for extended time periods, and not to be used for an unlined air supply duct, and not for constant dampness or free water conditions. Resistant to weather, but not intended for immersion in water. And switching back over to Thad.
Thank you, Alan. There are times on your project where you just have to put drywall on the job site before we really want it on there. So a natural extension to the fiberglass gypsum panels has been an interior product that's available to be used with extended exposure as well. Again, it has a fire-resistant Type X core, mold and mildew resistant, sheds water like the other products do. The coated fiberglass mat makes a big difference. This product comes in 1/2 inch and 5/8 thicknesses. And typically what we see is situations like this. You've got a spot where maybe you need to start to do an elevator enclosure. You've got some MEP going on somewhere. You need to put drywall on the job before it's ready. For those of you in the design community, your ASTM C840 specifies that no gypsum should be put on the job before it's 50 degrees and rising, 60% relative humidity, and the building is closed in. Well, that's not always going to happen. We just know in the real world we need to keep the building moving. So this particular product is an ASTM C1658 product. It meets all the different requirements we talked about with 12-month exposure warranty. It has that perfect 10 on the ASTM D3273. It's used and specified also. It's accepted in most UL designed fire rated assemblies. FSW 6 is what you'd want to look for, is one of the options you'd want to look for if you're looking at different ULs. We can help you as construction managers make sure that you get the right product on there. Another good picture. There's one here, and we've got another one coming. Those interior applications where you have areas in the plenum that you're going to put a tremendous amount of MEP HVAC product on top of them. So instead of putting paper-faced gypsum up there like we used to do when we had no other option, and I would tell you from my time on job sites in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, there was a time where if you saw some mold on a product, the inspector would come in and they would say, well, yeah, 3 parts bleach, 1 part water, spray it on there, wipe it off, and we'll move forward. Well, those days are gone. You know, if there's mold on the project, we're going to rip it out. So this is an area where you can put gypsum in there and you can continue to keep your schedule moving forward. In those areas where the product may extend down into the visible part of the wall assembly. Let's say it comes down a foot above or just above where the ceiling tile is going to be. You know, in those areas, because the gypsum core is still gypsum, but the fiberglass mat, one of the things that makes it work for us is that that mat bleeds into the core when we rehydrate the gypsum. That's perfect for making a nice strong bond so we can make sure that nothing falls apart if it gets wet. That's terrible when we think about wanting to paint it, because the paint will then not sit on that closed cell paper. That open cell fiberglass, it'll soak right in. So we want to go ahead and treat those joints as we typically would with the rest of our paper-faced drywall. And then we want to make sure that we skim over it in those areas where you're going to get light on the wall. So the GA214 2021 is the most recent edition, help critical lighting conditions. They actually call out glass mat in that document as an opportunity to do a level 5 in those areas. Just something to be aware of and watch out for. You know, here's another good example, a picture that was taken. If you think about trying to put gypsum up there, put a fire rated system up there when all this other stuff is done, probably not a good idea. It would take forever and it would probably never get done correctly. So you hang the product up there, you put your MEP in. This particular product interior or soffit use only. In other words, if it's going to be used on the outside of a building, it needs to be covered up, semi-covered. Non-structural panels, as all gypsum is, don't finish the joints until the building is properly closed in. Now, that's a little bit of a misnomer because you couldn't get your fingers up there behind some of those HVAC things to tape the joints to complete the fire rated system. Use setting compound and paper tape, put it up there, and when you get down to the point where if there's anything visible, those areas should not be finished until the building is properly closed in and conditioned. Everything else, as long as there's no cascading water, you'll be fine. Alan, talk a little bit about tile backer, which is another innovative product that's hit the glass matte panel product.
Yeah, already. So now we have a new ASTM. We had 1177, and then we evolved to C1178. So basically, it's kind of almost, you think of that panel Thad just went over there. You've got that same fiberglass panel, but now you're adding that acrylic coated water barrier on that. So now you've added that. So for bathroom wet areas, fantastic product, available in 1/2 and 5/8 thicknesses. So fire ratings are available. A lot of times the contractors in these commercial jobs like to use that because basically it's just like taking 5/8 type X, and you don't have to worry about mineral wool and some other things that you do on some other assemblies out there. So optional finishing, if exposed, number of ways that you can finish this. There's some of the East guys have pool assemblies even for interior pool applications. So you that acrylic coated fiberglass facer, that's what helps with the moisture barrier. So you're stopping it at the surface, right? Your tiles on that, you're stopping the moisture at the surface of that panel. So excellent performance in your high moisture environments is your bath, showers, kitchen, laundries. Recommended for both wet and non-wet applications, and code compliant for IRC and IBC. So back in 2005, 2006, they said, okay, no more green board in direct wet areas in your showers. So what you can do is use the fiberglass tile backer, cement board, or fiber cement were the only things that were allowed when they first changed those codes back in 2006 to be used in that wet area, direct wet area around the shower. So once again, there's a number of UL rated designs that can be used with the 5/8 type X. So great product. Substrate for your ceramic tile can be used once again in your tub shower areas, which that is what's in the code for your direct wet areas, and can be finished if exposed above the tile line very easily to skim that, above your tile line that's in there. So your walls, install panels either horizontally or vertically to framing using fasteners every 8 inches. And when applying tile, use minimum 20 gauge steel or wood framing, space 16 inches on center. And then your tile backer, you can see on the number 1 picture, fiberglass mesh tape, alkali resistant. That's embedded in the tile backer. And then your latex Portland cement mortar. And then you'll go over that with your tile and grout. So that's a quick, easy snapshot of how those are done. So finishing, tile can be either thin set mortar, organic adhesive, alkali resistant fiberglass tape, which we just mentioned. Allow tile setting material to cure for a day before grout application. And then outside the wet areas of showers and baths, you think of where your shower curtain will go sometimes. You're better off sometimes using a setting compound in that area because all purpose can get water soluble when it gets wet. So, think of outside that direct shower to go out a little ways with setting compound, but skim the entire surface with a joint compound above that. Intended for interior use only, which we mentioned, not exterior, because the heat from a tile or something like that would get very, very hot. You want to use a cement board on exterior applications. Always apply tile finishes to the acrylic face, not the colored backside. And joint should be treated with alkali resistant fiberglass mesh tape. Once again, do not install a vapor barrier directly behind the tile backer as that facer is. Do not apply tile backer directly to concrete or masonry, and not suitable for use in saunas and steam room applications where, right, if you're going to be consistently over that 125 degrees, you don't want to have that in there. That's where you'd want to look at a cementitious product.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate that. When we talk about sustainability, Gypsum products can contribute to the LEED rating system as well as other building rating systems if we're thinking about Living Building Challenge, WELL certification, Green Globes, etc. Today we're going to examine the LEED V4 credits that gypsum board products can contribute to. They include material ingredients, EPDs, low emitting materials. So we'll start with HPDs, Health Product Declarations. The material ingredients that LEED credit, this one does, rewards project teams for different products in which the chemical ingredients and products are inventoried using acceptable methodology. There's a red list of products that we all have to meet for selecting products to help minimize the use and generation of harmful substances. Gypsum board products with LEED compliant health product declarations and declare labels, declare is another area that we can hit, can contribute to this credit. These are one of the most requested ones that we see. When you think about HPDs, my counterpart Pat in California, she has a great way of clarifying this document and the next one. These documents measure the impact on the health of a building's occupants. So we think about keeping people healthy inside the building. And then EPDs, environmental product declarations, Pat also clarifies these by saying they measure the impact of the products that are used in the building on the environment. This EPD credit rewards project teams for selecting products from manufacturers who have verified improvement in life cycle impacts. We're doing our best to bring the product out of the ground and make sure that we can return it to the ground if we have to. So LEED focuses on minimizing the embodied energy, and carbon is a big hot button right now. Other impacts associated with the extraction and processing, transportation, maintenance, different things, and disposal of the low emitting materials. And then obviously, if you've ever had a new car, they have that what they call new car smell. That's basically the VOCs working their way out of the system as we get it there. So it's another piece, another important piece of the sustainability puzzle. Low emitting materials, LEED credits aim to reduce the concentration of chemical contaminants that can damage air quality, human health, productivity, and the environment. So you want to look for that Green Guard and Green Guard Gold label. So what have we learned? Well, we've learned that glass mat gypsum panel products have superior weather resistance, superior fire resistance. They help out with mold since they're inorganic, and they have some superior strength as we think about where we would put them and use them. So you'd want to specify them in the different categories by calling out the ASTM standard C1177, C1178, C1658. Any of these products that you use, you're going to get that ASTM D3273 protection, that important level 10 that we like to have. That's the best that's available out there. And then we have that 12-month exposure warranty. So just as a quick recap, we've kind of gone through, all the different ways that you can use the products, how they're designed, how they're different than regular paper-faced drywall, how you can identify where they could be used. And we've talked a little bit about sustainability. So we've given you a lot to look at in a short amount of time. So this concludes the AIA portion of our continuing education course, and I will apologize. We've run a little long. Alan and I tend to get a little wordy, and so we're going to go into going through some of the proprietary stuff at the end of our presentation here, give you an identification of some of the products that we've talked about for reference going forward and some of the resources we have available as a company. Any questions that did not get answered, as I said, we will make sure that we send out a document afterwards. We'll get you fixed up.
So National Gypsum is the exclusive service provider of our ProForm finishing products, which we're going to go through each of these, which is our joint compounds, perma-based building products, which are cement boards, cementitious, and Dexcel roof boards, which is our cover boards, and then Gold Bond building products, which is our regular drywall, the fiberglass mat panels, and all those. It is not a foot powder or moisturizing cream. It is our Gold Bond building products. So EXP, that's what we kind of went through today, our fiberglass panels. You're going to notice ours is purple. Interior Extreme is the interior panel, also available in abuse and impact resistant. Our fire shield sheathing is that you see on that picture in the building there. The shaft liner, once again, is fiberglass and the towel backer. All these have a 12-month exposure warranty, which is something to remember. The XP is our treated paper, which is going to be purple as well, and it scores a 10 like the fiberglass, but it scores a 10 for that ASTM mold test that we went through. So XP gypsum board, XP abuse, XP impact, which remember, which we spoke about, it's important how you specify the difference between those two, and sound break, which is our acoustical panel with the viscoelastic polymer that it's used. We've got a number of systems, and then the shaft liner in the XP treated paper as well. So Dexel is our roof board products. You can see on the left there, glass mat roof board for mechanically attached. And you can see there's a picture with the weights where they're adhering it. We're seeing more and more testing done with adhered testing for the cover boards. And the FA is our adhered, which it's kind of a coated mat that would be used in those scenarios. And then we also have now a very severe hail panel that is out there, which Thad showed you the great test where they test on the seam and everything else when they do that test for the hail test. But we have a hail board available. And then we also have another superior product that's used out there, but it's Dexel cement roof board. So if you have an indoor pool or a paper mill or a brewery or something with moist conditions, a lot of data centers have used this as well. But fantastic for nail pull and things like that, or screw pull through and bond. If you're not familiar with it, once again, we have another course just on cover boards, but please check those out, how they can maybe help you in your roof designs. Permabase is our cement board products on the left there, a number of different sizes. And then we've had out for a few years the Permabase CI, which is an insulated panel in various thicknesses up to 3-inch, where you're seeing more and more emphasis, right, in thermal bridging, which you want to cover that up to help with heating and cooling these buildings, because every one of those wood or metal studs is a thermal bridge. So if you can stop that and control some of that heat loss or gain, it can greatly help in looking at some of the cost of heating and cooling those buildings out there. So our ProForm compounds, you can see we've got the setting compounds and all the different type of all-purpose, and we actually have a dust tech. When you're looking at using the fiberglass, it can help with dust and extra mold enhancement in some of those scenarios out there. So here's our tech guides. You can see these are all available digitally. The construction guide, which will actually go over installation on shaft and area separation walls, the purple sound and wood book we're going to go through in the next couple slides. The sound book has over 300 assemblies. It'll give you the details, but 16 and 24 inches on center. You can see here wood, stud, metal, all different gauges of metal. And then the next picture actually shows you some tests. Here you can see the STC rating, the test on the right side on the top, and then the UL design on the bottom. But you can see here a metal of a 55 STC, and on the right a wood, in this case with a 50, and then it gives you the testing numbers. So the next book is our purple book, which goes through, you can see here, floor, ceiling, column and beam, some horizontal membranes. I like to point out on page 14, there's actually a 1 and 2 hour one-sided firewall. So not everyone has that. So you're in a strip mall or something like that, that can come out handy. Here's the details. You can see on the left, some of these details, it gives you the UL, and then the head of wall numbers called out. So just a lot of great information, and these are available digitally. And let us know, we can also get you hard copies. Reach out to your CDM. The wood book, this is relatively fairly new in the last couple of years, same kind of as the purple book, but it's geared towards wood construction, as you'll see in the next picture here. It'll give you some shaft details and things like that, which are hard to find sometimes in wood construction. But here you can see just a number of floor ceiling details and a lot of very good information that was put together. And your specs, here you can pull all these off of our website. You can see master spec, spec link. Please go to our website and get that information. If you need assistance, reach out to our construction design managers across the country. And here, like Thad mentioned, HPDs, EPDs, all available online. Jordy helps a lot with that, sending out that information in our corporate office in Charlotte. And here's our design center. Here's a lot of the information that you can find on there. Very, very resourceful. So please use it as often as you can. And here's our crew. So you can see we're pretty thin. Jordy will be sending a lot of the certificates. It helps with a lot of the lead and the other information. Pat out west, Thad up in the Midwest, Scotty up in the Northeast, Amy in that Southwest area, and I'm in the Southeast there. And Amy, who's an architect, is over our group. And then you'll see Mark, Jim, and Sam. They're our tech line, some of the best in the industry. You call them. If they're on a line, they'll actually get back to you. They're fantastic for their knowledge, a lot of years of wisdom with those three there. So if you have technical questions, they're fantastic.
And thank you for attending. We just like to say we appreciate your attendance today. Hopefully you've stuck with us through the end of this. You've had a chance to look at our resources. Alan did a great job of reviewing them and the products that we offer to the industry. So again, thank you. We'll address any questions we didn't get to at the end of this in a follow-up email, and we'll be issuing your certificates and AIA numbers as well.